Well, back here, supermarket bosses have said any price caps on the cost of essential food would be completely preposterous and idiotic. It follows reports that the government has urged supermarkets to limit the price of products like eggs, bread and milk in return for lifting some regulations. Well, joining me now, I'm pleased to say, is Pluck, Chief Executive of the Cold Chain Federation, which represents producers of more than half of all food stored and distributed in the UK. Thanks so much for joining us. So what's wrong then with the idea of the government forcing supermarkets to set price caps?
Well, I think this is another example, really, of the government actually trying to treat a symptom and not the cause. If we look at where food inflation has come from, we've had two crises in the last few years. One is the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the other, more recently, of course, is the Middle East crisis. And what that does is immediately affect fuel prices, which are an essential part of supplying food. But it also has a latent effect on energy prices as well. But if you just add to that some of the recent taxation that's taken place with this government, such as employment costs, national insurance, living wage, business rates, etc., really the cause here is actually that inflationary pressure from all of those things. And the government actually, whilst they're not responsible for the Middle East crisis or the invasion of Ukraine, what they can be responsible for is the taxation that sits behind that inflation. So to go to the supermarkets and say, is there any chance you could freeze the price on 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 products is really just trying to put a sticking plaster on a much larger wound, when the government actually know, because I've been in discussions with government every single week since the Middle East crisis started, and the government know that sitting behind major inflation issues in food is taxation, and they have the power to do something about that.
But I suppose, is it fair if supermarkets want something from government, say on loosening of regulations, that the government could want something back from supermarkets?
Well, the problem is that actually if they went to the supermarkets and said, any chance you could fix these prices in order for a deal where we will actually row back a little bit on packaging tax, for instance, what that means is that actually we're all operating in single-digit margins here, including the supermarkets. So if you fix a price somewhere and they lose money on that particular product, it means the price of food somewhere else has to go up. So actually inflation on food stays the same, because what you reduce in one area has to increase in the other area in order for us to operate with at least some margin.
What do you think we're going to see in terms of food prices? And I guess, do you think the public are prepared?
No, I don't think the public are prepared, and that's what really worries me, because even for a rich country, we've got over 6 million people who are currently in food poverty. Since the Ukraine issue started, what we've seen is around about a 25% increase in food inflation. Because of the current crisis, we know that we're looking at around anywhere between 7 and 10% on top of those increases. So actually the public are not prepared for this. And what it's going to do is push more and more people into food poverty, I'm afraid. That's something we desperately want to avoid. And it's something that we've been trying to persuade government that they need to help us avoid. But by simply saying, fix the price here and we'll drop a little bit of packaging tax is really not the issue. The issue is the fact that actually per litre, diesel has gone up by nearly 50p. The government today announced that actually they'll actually cease the increase of the 5p fuel duty, but actually that still leaves 45p. And that price rise on energy and fuel, which are the really big price rises, it's got to go somewhere, and that's going to go onto the supermarket shelves. And simply fixing the price of 1 or 2 products is not going to alleviate that food inflation. So we are looking, come the autumn, we're looking at substantial increases for members of the public, and that will push more people into food poverty.
Is there anything more, though, that supermarkets could do? You know, is there any kind of creative thinking given the increase in profits that we're seeing supermarkets make?
The thing is, this isn't just about supermarkets. This is about the entire food supply chain, starting from manufacturers to growers, all the way through to the logistics, which I'm responsible for, all the way through to supermarkets. So the supermarkets are already doing something and have been doing something for many years, and that is they're in probably the most competitive food market in the entire world. And by competing with each other, they're keeping prices low. Behind all of that is all the other industries that I've just described. But every single one part of that food chain is suffering massive price increases at the moment, from fertilizer all the way through to fuel to energy. So actually the supermarkets, I think, are doing what they can to keep prices down by competing with each other. And I don't think the move by the government today is anything other than fanciful and naive. It simply demonstrates that they don't really understand how the food system or the food pricing works in the UK.
Okay, Phil Pluck, CEO of the Cold Chain Federation, thanks so much for talking to us.